What is up and welcome back to Working Hard. In this episode, we're talking about how to make life-changing decisions that are right for you in a world where we're faced with endless choice, people-pleasing, and thousands of opinions. So many of the life improvement topics we've discussed on this podcast, from business growth to women's health to planning, are underpinned by the ability to make the right decisions. So to decide what daily habits will actually change your life in a way that you want to, or to decide what you actually want your career path to look like. And yet it's something that I don't think I've ever been taught or read up on until recently. So today we are looking for the answers. But as always, I am being joined by an expert. Adrienne Adhami has written an entire book on the subject of making decisions that matter. So if you're unsure about the future, you struggle to have tough conversations, or don't know where your gut instinct is, this episode is the one to listen to. Plus, I thought at the end we would answer all of your big decisions that you have DM'd me, so we actually get into how to make those decisions and go into some little dilemmas. Before we get into the episode, I'd be so grateful if you could make the decision to subscribe to my YouTube channel. The deal is you subscribe and then I put out a super interesting episode every single Monday to help you improve your life and start your week on the right foot. Adrienne Adhami, are you more working hard or hardly working at the moment?
Pains me to say it, but right now I am working hard.
Tell me about it.
I'm working hard. I feel like it's a season where sometimes you'll know this, you have seasons that are sprints and sometimes things are layered and you have to do all the things at the same time, which is not ideal. It's not what I would advocate for, but that's the season that I'm in. So I'm in a season of managing different commitments, managing different things, books come out, different events. There's a lot going on. So I'm just leaning into it. I'm enjoying it. It feels colourful. It does feel busy, but I know there'll be a season of kind of rest and recovery that will follow.
I love thinking of things as seasons. Anything that plagues me in life can be thought of as a season.
Exactly.
And it's solved.
Yeah.
Because I just think that it's so easy to get caught up in the fact that you need to be this perfect balanced version of all of these different things. And it's just so unrealistic at any given time. And I just think that, sometimes a friendship was for a season. Sometimes a career was for a season. Sometimes all of these things, I think that we forget how long life is and how we're not in one permanent state. So I'm personally a very big fan of the season outlook. I'd like to ask you, before we get into this podcast, what is one decision that you are proud of having made recently?
Okay, so a decision that I'm proud of having made recently is, given that I'm in this season that it is busy, I have been very intentional about not doing much at all at weekends. So I've had to say no to a lot of things. And I'm an extrovert, I'm a social person. I want to say yes to everything. So one decision that I'm proud of consistently making at the moment is saying no, keeping white space, keeping kind of the weekends as sacred free time to do whatever I need to do. Because it's so easy, isn't it, to say yeah, sure, and the kind of people pleaser in us or the obligation in us can sway our decisions. But sometimes standing firm and being like, I know that when that day comes, I'm going to be really glad that the day is free and clear and I haven't got to be somewhere at a certain time. So yeah, keeping Saturdays and Sundays as white space.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I think that kind of highlights the fact that there's both the original decision and there's the decision you have to make every single time to uphold that original decision. So if that original decision is the fact that you are going to keep them free, and then every single week you have to continuously say no to things, it does sometimes chip away at you.
Yeah.
And it's having that resolve to be no, this is the good thing for me. I made this decision. I am sticking to it. And past me thought this was a good idea. Therefore, I am going to continue what past me decided. But it's not always easy.
Yeah, it's not always easy. But exactly as you said, past me, I always think about future self as well. And my future self, I've been there. I'm sure you have as well. We learn lessons sometimes the hard way. And sometimes we don't learn it the first time. So for example, doing too much, for example, work-wise, and having the layering of social commitments and kids and training for a race, that's how I ended up burnt out a few years ago. So I think about my future self. I'm we're not going to do that again. We're not going to be burnt out. We're not going to be everywhere for everyone all the time. So like you said, upholding that decision, it's not always easy, but thinking about your future self, you're so glad when it comes to that day and you're today is just my day.
Yeah. Absolutely. I fully agree with that. And in your book, you say that we spend almost 3 days a year deciding what to watch on Netflix. So with that in mind, can you talk a little bit about the impact of all the decisions we have to make every day.
Sure. And that example I know might sound kind of crazy, but to just break it down and give some perspective, that is essentially, this was data that showed that people scroll for roughly 10.5 minutes deciding what to watch. So that's before they even choose, okay, what am I going to watch tonight? 10.5 minutes, just click, 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 because there is an abundance of choice, not just what to watch on TV now, but in so many things now in our lives, in the modern world, abundant choice. So that 10.5 minutes of flicking through channels, added up over a year is more than 2.5 days, which is wild. When you think about the important decisions that we need to make in our lives.
You should see me trying to watch a movie as well.
Because that's a commitment. So then you've really got to make sure it's the right choice. So even though that might seem like a silly example, I think it now applies to so many areas of our lives, from what to eat, what to watch, what to wear, where to travel, where to work, who to date. There's an abundance of choice. And as much as that might sound initially like a good thing, wow, we've got endless choice, this is great. Actually, it's paradoxical, because the more choices you have, the harder it is to make a decision. And then ultimately, and the data supports this, the less satisfied you will be with the final choice that you make.
Really?
Yes, because there's more variables, there's more trade-offs, there's more things to consider, there's more things that you're going to look and go, I could have had, maybe I could have had. That fear of, I call it FOBO. So many people have heard of FOMO, so the fear of missing out. FOBO is almost like the evil twin, lesser known but more dangerous. And FOBO is the fear of a better option. And it plagues so many of us, because you can just be, quite happy, satisfied in your job, but then look on LinkedIn or look on another site and suddenly you're like, oh, fear of a better option. Could that be better? Is the grass greener? Mm-hmm. And it's the same swiping through, dating app, or like I said, looking in your wardrobe. If you've got 30 pairs of jeans, it's going to be harder to choose the right pair versus if you have two. So this endless availability that we now have, and I mean, it goes on and on. There's thousands actually of decisions and choices we have to make daily. It's making so many people overthink. It's making them stuck. It's making them lack confidence in their decisions. And like I said, ultimately, even when they choose, they're still not really committed, because they're looking back thinking, oh, could I? Should I? Is there something better going to come along?
Yeah, it's so funny, because when you talk about that, I can see how that manifests in like all different areas of life now, not just things like dating with dating apps, which I feel like is a huge one that like comes to mind with that. But in terms of the amount of lives we see on social media, this kind of perceived better option constantly, like the opportunity cost of you going to work every day is the fact that you could be a content creator, or you could be this, or you could be this. And it's like this constant, all of these other options kind of like waving in your face versus where we would have been, I don't know, 50 years ago, when actually you've chosen what you're doing and you're not necessarily seeing other people's day to day. You might see the fruits of their labor, you might see what they say about their job, but realistically, you're not having it so rubbed in your face. So how do you think this is impacting our kind of headspace around decision making?
I think it is negatively affecting people in many ways. One, in just terms of an energy drain, that kind of constant comparison and thinking and overthinking. And I think it's just so draining to kind of loop around the same thing. So I think that's one way in which it's quite debilitating for people. In another, I think it's quite anxiety inducing, because there's a lot of a feeling of pressure. Because like you said, this kind of looking at so many options and this idea that actually, what if I make a mistake? What if I choose and it's the wrong choice? And I think that for us, a lot of what we do and the way we live now, I think it feels more visible. So for example, like our mistakes and our failures, maybe we'll come on to talk about mistakes and failures, but within entrepreneurship, within the startup world, within the business world, we hear so many people talk about failure and rejection, and, it's so great. We should all be embracing failure, and it's kind of, and risk. But the reality of that, I think, is very different. And I think for some people, taking risks, is easier, but it is just different. And we don't see the context, we don't see the nuance, we don't see all of the different multifaceted things. We just see one version that's presented to us. And often, I think, where we're looking at so many other options, like you said, looking at other people's careers or lives or partners or houses or bodies or whatever it is, everything feels more visible. And I think, therefore, people's failures feel more visible. And so a real example of that is if someone says, okay, they're going to start their own business, or they're going to, launch their podcast, or they're going to, I'm the encourager. I'm always the person that says, just start, just give it a go for it. But it's the idea that, well, what if I put it out there and it fails, or what if, people can see the metric, they can see you saying, oh, I'm not doing that anymore, or I've changed my mind, or it didn't work out. And I think, unfortunately, that just holds so many people back from even starting. So they don't even make a decision. They're stuck in a place of indecision and inaction. And ultimately, I think, action is what, for me in my life, in my experience, in my multifaceted career, action is what actually leads to confidence and competence. So by doing, so I often say to people, what if confidence comes after the decision, not before?
Yeah.
So when someone says, oh, I'm not, they don't have the confidence, because I don't think people lack motivation. I think people lack confidence. And the key there is sometimes you have to take the action first. And so this, going back to, the fear of decisions, the fear of mistakes, is that if we didn't, maybe, if no one was going to see the mistake, if no one was going to see the failure, or if we felt like nobody would, I think people would be bolder and they'd start things and they'd change their mind, and they'd understand the decisions aren't a closed door. They're not binary. They're not irreversible. So many of the decisions that we make, we approach as if they are irreversible.
Yeah.
It's very, very few decisions. Can you think of one that's irreversible?
Well, it's so funny that actually when you were talking about that, I was thinking very specifically of the founder of Whoop, who came on the podcast. He talked about one-way door and two-way door decisions, which is actually now my favorite way to think about decisions, because you're totally right. Like, there are thousands of decisions and it's easy to feel all of these decisions almost weighted the same. And I often feel this in work. I'll kind of be going through like my list of approvals and I'll be like, oh my God, there's hundreds of things to decide here. And actually then to do my due diligence, I'm like weighing it all up and I'm being really careful and all of this. And a lot of the time there isn't a right answer, especially when it comes to building your own company, because you don't know the future, like you don't know what's going to happen. And being able to like kind of decrease the weight of some decisions by just being like, this is very obviously a two-way door decision. If you make this decision, you can unmake this decision tomorrow. Whereas obviously there are the one-way door ones. And I think now you say it, I'm realizing like you're so right. We think of so many decisions as these one-way door decisions, whereas actually like how many of these things are actually two-way door decisions? And I think that will be really useful as well. Towards the end of the episode, we're going to talk about some dilemmas of decisions that people have sent in that they'd like you to help them make. And I think it's exactly that. A lot of them, when I was reading ahead of time, a lot of them feel like one-way door decisions. They're actually two-way door decisions.
Yeah, it can take a lot of pressure off when you recognise, of course, it wouldn't be ideal, maybe. So to move to another country and then go, you know what, I'm moving back. There's a lot of admin that I wouldn't want to do. But most decisions are reversible. And it's more, it's quite freeing actually when you can accept that and go, hey, I wouldn't necessarily want to undo this, but if I had to, I could, and it wouldn't be the end of the world, wouldn't be the end of my career, it wouldn't be the end of my life. You'd adapt, you'd find the next step, you'd figure it out.
And I know you have a 6-step routine for working out a good decision. If there was someone who was listening to this now who has a big decision to make, will you walk them through that 6-step routine for making that decision well?
Yeah, okay, well, it's not so much maybe 6 steps that you'd go through for a big decision, because basically the first thing, it's kind of like rules of engagement. So you'll know this because, of course, running businesses, there's certain rules of engagement so that we're all on the same page. These are the kind of checks and balances, and it's kind of more of a framework for that. But the first one is actually determining the stakes. So determining, is this decision high stakes, low stakes, or no stakes, meaning it doesn't really even matter at all. Low stakes is often quite a frequent decision. So things that we make every day, they seem quite mundane, it doesn't really matter in the moment, but as those decisions compound, we know those small things matter over time. And then the high stakes decisions, which I think is what you're referring to here, which is like, this is a big decision actually. This is one of those things that could potentially have big consequences, huge knock-on effect, could impact other people, and so it's high stakes. So I think if you've already figured that out and you've classified it, and you definitely, like you said, not reversible, irreversible, this is high stakes, it's really, really important, then I'd say out of the list, there's a few things to consider. Firstly, so you've determined that it's high stakes, I would think about allocating time. So procrastination is something that comes up a lot. So people will let things kind of roll on for maybe a week, a month, 6 months, maybe a whole year's passed, and they still haven't really made a commitment or made a decision. So calling time simply means that you have a deadline. You have a deadline. And like I said, Grace, I know working in business, there's so many things that they have deadlines, whether it's quarterly, whether it's yearly, you have to decide. You couldn't just say to different stakeholders in the business, I haven't decided yet. I'm not sure. Are we going to add that product or add that feature, or are we going to, raise more money? You'd have to make decisions. So I think in our personal lives, I think people who've got quite an entrepreneurial mindset can apply some of these things quite easily. But I think for people where it doesn't necessarily come naturally to them to do that, it's really great to kind of have these tools in place. So you've got this high stakes decision. You've got to set a deadline. You've got to call time and decide, okay, actually put a date on the diary. So, okay, on 6 weeks from today, this day, I'm going to have made this decision. You might want to call in on other people. So you might want to get some advice, some help, some support. We don't have to do everything on our own. I think that's a lesson that took me a very, very long time to learn in work and life. And actually, sometimes there's so much like wisdom in the crowd, or, it depends. The caveat here is, who are you asking for help and support? Make sure you're asking the right person, someone who wants to see you succeed, wants to see you win, who champions you, who loves you, someone who wants more for you, not more from you. And then also I'd say someone who they're in the right position to help you out with this decision. So for example, let's say you're talking to someone who's never really been in a committed relationship and you're talking to them about a big decision to get married or to get divorced. They might love you and they might care for you, but they might not be the right person to ask.
Sure.
So sometimes it's like going to the person who has kind of walked the steps that you're going to. Maybe they've done that path before or made a similar decision. Going to that person for advice, and be really specific about the advice or about the help that you want. So if you just lay everything out and go, what do you think? What should I do? You might not get the response that you want. But I think sometimes asking people, okay, I'm trying to make this decision. These are the variables. These are the things that I'm considering. And what I'd really love you to do is be really honest with me about which of these you think is going to be, and then kind of really spell it out. So be really specific about the ask. And then last but not least, this feels like quite a big one, but trusting your gut and trusting your intuition is such a huge, it's a huge topic in itself, but it's such an important thing that when we go back to, I guess, the beginning of this conversation about overwhelm and having too many options, I think we're really losing that ability to listen to our own intuition, to understand the kind of the first gut feeling, the first reaction, the red flag. I know we'll all have heard red flag, but what does that really mean? It's essentially pattern recognition. Our brains are incredible at spotting patterns. So when something feels off, when something's a red flag, when your brain recognizes, pause, caution, hold on a second, we've seen this before, we've felt this before, that is your gut talking, that is your intuition. And how many times, Grace, can you think of a time, I'm sure you can, when your intuition has been right on the first time, but you've talked yourself out of it, you've overridden it, and then later on you come back and you go, you know what, I knew,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? I knew when I...
So many times.
How many times? So how many times do we do that before we start to trust ourselves, have the confidence and the conviction to go, my gut told me straight away that this was the right thing to do, or that wasn't the right person to hire, or that wasn't the right opportunity. So if it's high stakes decision, set a deadline, call time, gather some wisdom, some insight from others, and really sit and think about the body reaction, the body response. If you were to flip a coin, heads being yes, tails being no, when the coin is in the air, what are you hoping for when it lands? Because that's your gut feeling. If it lands and you feel relieved, or if it lands and you feel disappointed, that's your decision made.
I think that's a really, really great matrix. And how do you think we can differentiate well between a good decision that kind of makes you feel good versus a correct decision?
Yeah, and this is tricky, isn't it? Because how do we even define what the correct decision is? But I know exactly what you mean. And sometimes making a good decision or a decision that feels good in the moment certainly isn't the right decision to make. Or inversely, when we know the decision that's right is going to be really, really hard to do. So I guess a really anecdotal example for myself was actually the decision to get a divorce. And you don't make a decision like that overnight, especially as a mother with a child. You just, it's something that takes so long and is so hard. And that was the kind of decision that did not feel good. It didn't feel like, oh, this is, this is going to be great. You don't feel like that. But I knew, again, future self, I was thinking about myself in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And I knew it was the right decision. I knew it in my head, I knew it in my heart, I knew it in my body, but it didn't feel good. And so I think sometimes we do want to, make a decision and in the moment feel really good about it to go, oh, I'm making the right choice. But I think sometimes it's actually probably more common than not that it's the inverse of that is true.
Yeah. And what would you say the most important decisions are that we're kind of making every day? Because you've talked about how many decisions there are.
Yeah.
And how do we differentiate what the most important ones are?
Well, I mean, you know me, you know that I've worked in the wellness industry now for 15 plus years. And so I think some of the real easy examples are actually related to our health and our well-being and a silly example of what to eat for breakfast. That's a decision you make every single day. What time you go to bed every single day, whether to go for the walk or go for the run or go to the class. We make those decisions every day. And if you make it once, so let's say, I don't know, this morning you have a really delicious triple chocolate muffin, let's say, I don't know. Is that going to destroy your health just one time? No. But if you made that decision every single day, after a few years of eating that high sugar, ultra processed thing every morning, it's going to compound and have an effect. And so I think sometimes when I think about, okay, what are the most important decisions that we're making? They are the ones that we repeat the most often, because it's that 1,000 paper cuts. It's the small decisions that can go unnoticed. It's the small habits, small behaviors, the small things that go unsaid. Those things accumulate. And sadly, I think later in life, it's those small things that we didn't do much about or we didn't kind of take action on that can really, make the biggest impact. So I think from a health perspective, it's things like, prioritizing movement, prioritizing sleep, nourishing our bodies. We all have this so much information out there now, right? There's more than ever when it comes to what to eat, how to train our bodies, the importance of sleep, the effects of alcohol. It goes on and on and on. We've got wearable technology, we've got apps, we've got data, we've got dashboards with numbers showing us exactly what's going on inside our bodies, which is incredible, but it doesn't seem to be making much difference in terms of behavior change. So I think sometimes those really, really important things, if you said to me, okay, I've got a really big goal for the next 5 years, regardless of what the goal is, what are the things that could stop you from getting there? And one of them is your own well-being, your own physical and mental health. If you are the most ambitious, productive person in the world, but you end up with a chronic health condition, or you're so burnt out that you can't even enjoy the life that you've worked so hard to build. And I actually see that so often. And I think I'm seeing it more and more since the pandemic to now. Especially I talk about ambitious, productive people, ambitious, productive women, I want to encourage people to go for it, build your vision, build your dream, do it, but not at the cost of your own health and your own well-being. Because as I said, when you get to that thing you've worked so hard for, you can't even enjoy it because you're so exhausted or you're chronically ill. So I think the small fundamentals, the daily things that we all hear and we kind of go, yeah, people roll their eyes, Adrienne, I know, but I don't have time for breath work or meditation or to have protein breakfast. It's those small things. It's those small things, and sleep. Get enough sleep, stay hydrated, do the basics that your mum probably told you. If you really want to, that will add up over time. And then you'll have the capacity and the energy to make the big decisions, to create a career, to create a life, to hopefully take you exactly where you want to go.
And so given we're making so many decisions every single day and the small ones are also important, but the big ones are important and all of this, how do we deal with decision fatigue? How do we decrease the effect that it's actually having on our lives?
Yes. Okay. So decision fatigue, exactly as it sounds, is the more decisions we make throughout the day, it's like a muscle. You kind of just get, worn out. And by the end of the day, you're just kind of probably going for the path of least resistance. You're going for the easiest and most obvious choice, regardless of whether it's the best one. So the best way to mitigate this is to essentially just create some predefined rules. And rules can sound so boring and so limiting and restricting, but I think rules can just liberate us. And they can also really help with people that find it hard to set boundaries, because they can just have a set of pre-made rules. So a good example would be if you went to dinner with someone who told you they're a vegetarian, you wouldn't try to convince them oh, try the steak, just try it, it's delicious, just try it, because you just accept it. Oh, they're vegetarian. So if you are someone who struggles with boundaries and let's say you're trying to drink less alcohol, you just make the rule, which is I don't drink at work events, or I don't drink on weekdays. And I know friends who work in industries where so much of their work life is around lunches and events and dinners, and alcohol is so much a part of it. So they'd say to me, I really actually, I want to drink less, and actually I want to do dry January, for example. But then a week in, it's like you're at a work then, or, something's going on. It's like, oh, come on, just have one, let your hair down. So having a pre-made rule is almost like this get out card, which is like, oh, by the way, I don't drink on weekdays. Done. There's no negotiation. There's no willpower. There's no, back and forth. It's just done. A decision that I made like that, I guess, in my pre-made rules, 2 actually. One was about, again, keeping weekends sacred, especially with kids. I don't check emails at the weekend. I don't respond to emails at the weekend. I don't even look at them. And as much as that might sound like a really easy and small thing, we know our habits, right? They're on our phone. It's so easy to just open your phone, and it's almost like a muscle memory. You're just straight into it. So I learnt this the hard way, and I think I must have looked at an email once on a Saturday afternoon. I was about to take my son to a football match. I was doing something else, and it kind of really just sent me into a bit of a tailspin of oh my gosh, I need to do loads of stuff before Monday. Just basically my whole weekend, my headspace was completely hijacked by this one email, and that was my decision.
I know the feeling,
right? And it was my decision to open it. So I can't blame the other person. Why did they send me this email on a Saturday? Because it was my decision to open it. So I made that rule, which is I don't look at emails on a weekend. And then another one, which is really hard. I'd love to know what you think about this. This is my rule, which is I don't say yes to things with less than 7 days notice.
Ooh. I would never see my friends. Or if I had my way, yes.
Yeah.
They operate on a different calendar cycle.
Okay.
It's the best way.
What about work things though? What if someone said to you, oh, this work opportunity's come up. Can you do this in 48 hours?
External, yes. Mm-hmm. Internal, no.
Okay.
But I agree with the premise, and I'm so glad you brought up your rules, because I always feel like I'm the least fun person on the universe. Sure. In the universe, because I make up rules for everything, but I know it's because I am the type of person who responds well to rules, and without rules, I really fatigue myself. I really genuinely can feel the difference in fatigue. That is exactly why at the beginning of every week, I have every single workout scheduled in my diary. I know where I am going. I know how I am doing it. I know what it is. Same with meals.
Do you meal prep?
Yep. I actually use a meal prep service at the moment.
Yep.
Purely because I'm that's what works for me, and I was ending up spending more getting takeout because of the amount of times I'd be home late and all of that. And other things, I specifically for that reason, whatever it might be, I had a period of time where I would be at work, and any time there was cake in the office, I wouldn't be able to not have it because A, I believe that everyone is entitled to cake, but B, I would just be it's free, and so I'm going to have it. But most of the time I wouldn't actually want it, and I spike I have insulin resistance, so I really notice the difference to the point that it will throw off my whole day, and I'll often get really bad brain fog and all of this, which is a whole different topic. But I would just go for that kind of cake in the office, and it would always ruin my afternoon. It would always ruin my afternoon. I'd be bad at my work. I'd be bad in meetings. I'd be unfocused. I'd feel crashed, and I just was a less good version of myself. Yeah. And I just made a rule. I was just I do not eat cake in the office. If I want to finish my day and go and buy a cake or whatever it might be, do that. But I felt like I lost all control of who I was, because the second this cake came in, I was cake. Yeah. And must celebrate this person and all of that. And I think that it's such a good example of, yes, some people, there is of course a line, and restrictiveness, especially when it comes to things like food, is important to talk about and think about. But knowing that you are a person that just needs to be regulated, and to put some regulation in place so that actually you just don't put yourself in the position where you are making the decision, because you know that at the time you regularly make bad decisions for yourself where instant gratification is involved. I feel is so important, and it makes me sound unfun, but
well, I don't know if it makes you sound unfun. I feel let's be honest, we're grown-ups. And the
I'm also not that fun, so I don't know what this campaign for me to be seen as fun is.
It's really fun, everyone.
Please see me as fun.
But the thing is you've made the rules. That's what you're saying as well, is it's not like someone else has restricted you and said you can or can't do this. We're not kids. We are adults. I'm it's time to almost take responsibility. We're grown-ups. We pre-make those decisions based on, exactly as you said, past experience. Okay, when I did that last time, I felt rubbish. It wasn't good for me. And I think drinking, again, I know it's a really like tricky topic for a lot of people around like not drinking. But again, so many people want to moderate their drinking. They want to drink less. They're, you know, looking for low and no alcohol brands, etc. Because it is one of those things that people can't, once you have one or two, we know prefrontal cortex, the executive function, the decision-making part of your brain, after 2 glasses of wine, guess what? It's offline.
Oh, I know it is.
So yeah, so that idea that I'm going to have 2, once you have 2, the person that made the decision to only have 2 is no longer there. It's like, I'm having 10. So I think, again, I know myself. I'm quite an all or nothing binary. I mean, us two, can you imagine? We have fun.
So much fun. We should go out sometime.
It's all or nothing. I'm either like, oh no, I'm having water, or I'm having everything, and that's it. Yeah, I'm on the table. I'm the last one standing. Yeah, every time.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I think that I do think that sometimes we make excuses based on the fact that we like to put it under this thing like, oh, don't restrict too much, which is a very valid thing that we should absolutely be looking at in lots of cases. However, I think that we, at the same time, if you're putting yourself in a situation over and over and over that you feel the consequences of, and yet you feel helpless to make the decision to improve that, restrictiveness is not the issue. Yeah. Like, it's not the fact that or sometimes over-restrictiveness is the issue, but often it's the fact that there is just no regulation in place. And I think that as soon as I noticed that and stopped making excuses for myself based on the fact that I was like, oh, but everyone should be able to do this, or everyone should be, and it's like, yeah, cool, do it at another time where it doesn't ruin your day, or it doesn't make you feel shit the next day, or it doesn't, whatever it might be, so that you can actually take a little bit of control back as to when you're feeling shit, how you can decide not to feel shit.
Yeah, well, that word excuses, Grace, I know a lot of people don't like that word, but I remember having a conversation with a friend, and this was actually around money and decisions, and it was kind of that calling out of like, is this an excuse? Because yeah, you know, everyone's financial situation is different, but one of the rules or decisions or something that I tried to kind of help her to figure out was like where she was wasting money on things like Uber Eats or food delivery, different, you know, getting cabs, like loads of like just passive consumption of clothes. So, you know, just popping in and just get this cute little thing. And like you said, without any restriction on spending, you can waste a lot of money. And then the excuse of maybe if you're trying to save for something that's really important in your life, then I think kind of, having that kind of person sometimes to call out your nonsense. And the word excuses, I know a lot of people don't like it, but I think sometimes we need that person to go, hey, do you realize when you add up those receipts, you could be saving £500 a month or £1,000 a month, and you see it and it's like, wow, you know? So yeah, those small decisions, those small little treats, those small little things, sometimes for a short period of time, let's say you have a no spend for 3 months, like just look at the difference and make that decision for your future self. You set the boundary for yourself and then sharing it, and other people will respect it as well. When you tell them this is a rule, they go, oh, okay. They don't really tend to push back when it's a rule because we follow rules.
Yeah, no, I really agree with that. And I want to speak a little bit about quitting and letting go. I thought it was so interesting that the word decide actually comes from the Latin for to cut off. You know, quitting is obviously a huge decision, usually in anything. And if there's someone who is listening who knows that they struggle to quit things, or they're thinking of something that they're currently struggling to quit or cut off or walk away from, what should they be doing to make that decision?
Okay. Well, we've talked a little bit about gut and intuition already. I think that's the first thing, because often people, it's just such a simple thing, but just really, really thinking about, you already know what you want to do. Doesn't necessarily mean you can do it tomorrow. You know, life's not always that simple of like, well, you know what you want to do, so just get on with it. Just, you know, just quit, just change. Sometimes things take time, but if you really already know what you want to do, that's the best place to start. And then I think really understanding why you're not doing it. You know, what is it? So are you familiar with the sunk cost fallacy?
Yes.
The idea that the more time you've put into something, the more likely you are to hold on to it, because we go, well, I spent 3 years trying to build this, or I spent 4 years studying for this, or I spent 6 years in this relationship. Or it's this idea that that time and effort and energy that we've poured into something is suddenly wasted if we don't continue it or we don't see it through, which actually, again, paradoxically or ironically, we then just continue to pour more time, more effort, more energy into something for longer, even when we know it's no longer the right thing. So I think for a lot of people, if they're listening to this, they will know straight away. They'll recognize the feeling, which is like, I have wanted to leave this job for a year, or I have wanted to I started, pursuing this thing, and now it's really not what I thought it was going to be. It's not fulfilling me. Maybe my values have changed, my goals have changed, but I'm still doing this because I said I was going to do it. And you're just kind of there, there's no purpose to it. There's no meaning to it. So I think if you recognize that feeling, you know what it is, then it's just about taking action. And again, I can't stress this enough. Daniel Pink wrote this brilliant book about the regrets of the dying. And he actually talks about 4 kinds of regrets. And the regrets that people, like at the end years of their life, typically regret are regrets of inaction. So it's not regrets of mistakes. It's not, I started this business and it failed, or I got married and it didn't work out. Those aren't the things. At the end of life, it's the inaction of, I really knew that I wanted to do that and I never started, or I never did it. So I think just sitting with that, I know it's a bit, it's a bit heavy, but I think just sitting with that and going, actually, what is the cost of me not quitting? What is the cost of inaction here? Emotionally, financially, the time cost. What is this going to cost me? If I'm still here in the same place, doing the same thing 12 months from now, all it's cost you is another year of your life. Mm. So I really hope that is an encouraging way for people to maybe get the courage to take action.
Yeah, no, I think that I can almost imagine someone listening to this and be like, oh God. I gotta do it. I've got to do it. I gotta do it. And what about making big decisions like that where they affect people other than you? Because obviously that often comes into people's decision making, as it should to some extent, but not, it is your life and only you have to live it. So how would you recommend making those decisions?
Yeah, well, this is the point, because most, I guess, of our decisions do impact others. We don't live our lives in isolation. Many of us have, whether it's our family members, our friends, our co-workers, our kids, our decisions do impact others. It's like a ripple effect, So I do think it's important, because most people won't, regardless of the advice, if we say, put yourself at the center and focus on your needs, and people will hear that, but they're always going to go, well, what about this person and that person? Because we're so interconnected, and those people that matter to us should be considered in our decision making. I think the line, though, is when you're making a decision for someone else to the detriment of yourself. And that can be often, I think, think about parents, people that might have quite pushy parents who really want them to do a certain thing, and they've done it for years and years, or maybe it's, what they choose to study, what career they chose. And I've heard that from friends, my own friends, who've said, yeah, you know what, actually, it was never my choice really, or my decision. I never really thought about it. I was young. I just kind of went through the motions of my life. So I think those are the kind of decisions sometimes when you might be having a conversation, or you might be thinking, actually, this is really what I want, but it's going to let someone else down. Or maybe, my partner's not going to be so happy about that. And it's kind of finding that balance between what is best for you, what you really truly want, what matters to you. Because as you rightly said, ultimately it is your life to live. And sometimes there's a harmony and there's a compromise and there's a way of kind of, figuring out. But other times I think when you know that you're putting what you really, really want on the shelf, or you're just pushing it down, or you're kind of, it's to the detriment of yourself to please someone else, that's when I think we really have to kind of, it's hard and it's easier said than done, but it's where we have to vocalize these things. We have to kind of, what would it look like if you chose yourself? Even just asking yourself that question in a journal prompt, writing it down, what would it look like when you're trying to make this decision? If you just chose what you really truly want, what would that look like? What would it be like for that other person? How would you communicate it to them? And sometimes it's not as bad as we think.
Yeah.
There's certain things maybe where we build it up in our heads to being like, oh my gosh, it's such a big deal. But actually when you write it down, you're like, oh, maybe it's not such a big deal at all.
Yeah. No, I'm totally with you there. And I think that even just knowing what the 2 different outcomes would look like and how each of those things sit with you, I feel like has often been really helpful with me. And very on topic, I asked our listeners to send in any specific decisions that they needed to make at the moment, because I obviously already good at this and you have your matrices, and I feel like I would be surprised if anyone got to this part of the episode and not kind of have a gut feeling about what they need to do with this decision if they've sent in one of these dilemmas. But I really want to talk through these and we can both give our opinion on what we feel like they should do. So we're going to go straight into it. So the first dilemma: I hate making decisions. I dread the day I have to plan my own wedding, lol. So I'm throwing my hat in the ring here. I've taken a year-long hiatus from my life in England, and I've got 3 options to choose from. 1, go back to the family farm, we don't own it, but we run it, and work incredibly hard to keep the farm in the family and keep it profitable. 2, leave the farm and get a corporate job within food or farming, more secure but maybe less fulfilling. 3, leave the farm and launch my own business within the food farming sector. Maybe this should be reserved for my therapist, but all help is welcome, even just on how to avoid delaying decisions.
Okay, so we've got 3 options on the table. So the decision-making matrix at the back of the book hopefully would be really helpful here, because you actually score things. So you come out, I'm such a data-driven person. You can tell I work in wellness tech, but data-driven. So it'll give you a score. But the first thing I'm thinking when I hear that is, we've talked about this, are any of those options irreversible? I don't think so, but I think understanding what this person's core value and is right now. So for example, the second one, I think we said about take a corporate job. So essentially it might be like get the salary, might be less fulfilling. For some people, so for example, if economic security is the most important thing right now, if you need a salary, you need financial security, then that is, of course, the way to go. And it might be that it's unfulfilling or less fulfilling in the short term. Doesn't mean you're going to be there forever. You might set yourself a limit and go, I'm going to go into this work for 5 years, which might sound like a long time, but time flies. And then I'm going to have this, economic security, or build a little bit of a cash buffer to then pursue option 3, which was like, okay, I'm going to start my own business. I don't know this person's situation. They might have cash already to rely on. They might have a safety net. They might have a support system, and they might be able to do option 3 straight away. I don't feel like they really want to do option 1. That was my gut feeling.
That feels like the expectation. Like that feels like the one that they feel like their family expects them to do. I don't know why it's feeling like that. Mainly because I think that is the type of thing that is often expected from like a family business or whatever it might be. But yeah, I don't really have anything to add on your kind of what you've said. I feel like there's so much talk online about launch your own business and just take the big leap and all of this, and I think that is very valid at a lot of times, but I totally agree that a lot of the time it completely negates the fact that actually you need to build yourself some sort of what if this goes wrong fund to make sure that you're not throwing everything into the balance, and instead you're making a good decision where you can concentrate on the business rather than concentrating on the fact that actually it has a month to work, otherwise you have nowhere to live.
Yeah, the stress of that, and that is such a valid point. So really quick before we move on to the next one, because you're so right, the world of entrepreneurship, it's always, risk it all, build your thing, shoot your shot. And like I said, I'm an encourager. However, exactly as you just said, I think everyone's situation is very different. And so at one point in the book, I think it might be in the success chapter, where I talk about like tailoring advice. And what I mean is, and you'll appreciate this because you love fashion or clothes, is that let's say you find a suit and it's 70% off, some beautiful designer that you love, but it's too big for you. You can buy the suit and you can get it tailored to fit you. And I feel like that is the best thing that I've learned to do throughout my life with people's advice. So I might take a business advice, investment advice, finance advice, but it's like I'm tailoring it to fit my situation right now, rather than, for example, people just go, oh, okay, well, Jeff Bezos says this and Warren Buffett says that, and like you might not be in their situation. So I feel like that's a good example there, which is like not everyone is cut out to be an entrepreneur. Not everyone's personality is, not everybody's situation or circumstance is. Some people are, some people aren't. But I think really like going, okay, maybe I could take that advice and tailor it because my situation is different. Maybe if you don't have that safety net, if you don't have a runway, build it first before you jump in and launch your business.
I'm all for that. And I also think more experience is never going to be an issue. Like understanding how other businesses run and all of that is never going to be a problem. Okay, on to the next one. I started a job 3 months ago. It's great, but I know so much that I want to start a business. That is my dream, and I will not feel fulfilled without it. I'm happy to start it in my 5 to 9 first, as I've been hit with the idea now, but is it too soon to start something alongside my job? This is the first full-time job out of school too, and also I'm scared to start because I haven't met my boyfriend or future husband yet. I'm so scared of getting the business to a level and then having to find someone as a successful woman, which I know is hard, rather than finding someone and growing together. There is so much to say.
But I also love the conviction.
Yeah,
I love the energy.
I love the conviction, and I also love the honesty and awareness of the fact that some of these, like, it's so shit that is something that you would have to consider.
Right.
And I would like it not to be the case, but I also would be lying if I wouldn't say maybe with my girls at dinner,
it still
that
is.
type of thing, even if I would be like, I want you to prioritize your life and your work.
Yeah.
But let's start with the first part.
Okay. So the first part, doing the full-time job and thinking, okay, is it the right time to start and launch, all the rest of it? Gosh, it really is a tricky one because I don't know the idea and I don't know the context. And sometimes with some business ideas, it's timing. And okay, being first mover advantage in certain sectors, it really does pay off to be an early adopter. But in others, it's kind of like you said, doing the research, getting more, building a network as well. Like network, I don't know if you've found this within your career, I'm sure you have. Network is so important. And I think depending on how young you are, if you're just kind of starting out in your career, over the next few years, you're going to meet so many people. You're going to build a network, and that's going to be really useful when you launch your business. So I would say, and again, we've both talked about how fun we are, but I feel like I definitely prioritized work over fun throughout probably most of my life, my 20s, my early 30s. It's only now in my late 30s that I'm actually prioritizing fun and joy. So depending on the person, if you're like I was when I was very young, it's like work is going to be the thing that fulfills you. You may be a bit addicted to achievement. You might be a firstborn daughter. Like you might just be like, like then go for it. But I think if you want to have a bit of fun, have a bit of, like I said, build your network, take your time, the time's going to pass really, really quickly,
Yeah, so I totally agree with that. The one thing I would say is like, in the way they're writing it in terms of like, I will not be happy without this business. And sometimes even if that might genuinely not be the case, like you might get there and you might realize that it's not the case, but until you are there, you are probably always going to think it is the case. So I also think that, saying I can start it in my 5 to 9, so doing it outside of work hours and all of that, I always a huge proponent for actually just like taking that opportunity and like kind of workshopping the idea, like trying to get samples if it's a physical product, or talking to people about the idea, or setting up your domain or whatever it might be, and actually like getting a taste for what that is all really like, I feel like is so important. And it might be that you do it for a few months as your 5 to 9 and then you're like, do you know what, I'm going to stick with my job for now. It also might be that you start it and it takes off and you quit your job and all of that. I feel like if you are, this is in my mind the true hallmark of entrepreneurs, is you will tell them every reason why not to do it and they will still do it, which is quite a good indicator, because it is so fucking hard that actually it's best that someone's yelling at you not to do it and you're like, cool, I'm going to do it anyway. And that to me is like, great, cool, you're where you need to be. On the second half of it, in terms of like, I don't want to start the business because I haven't met my person yet and I'm scared because it's harder to meet someone as a successful woman, I like,
don't wait for that.
Concentrate on yourself.
Yes.
Like
okay,
that's
amen.
the big, I will not sit here and tell you that is not the case, because I do think it is the case and I wish it wasn't the case. Like I wish we weren't in a society where actually it is harder for successful women to find partners or whatever it might be. But I also think that finding a partner is not the goal, finding the right partner is the goal. And the chances that you'll find the right partner by being with someone just because they were the person you could meet before you started something, so you weren't too intimidating to them, is not going to be the right person.
Gosh,
and
no.
Life is short, but it is long.
Yeah, and if that's, like you said, that passion and that energy that this person has is still going to be there, that dormant part of you is still going to be there. So then what happens when you let it rip and exactly, then you'll just essentially maybe grow away from them. And also like this thing around waiting, so I've talked so much in this episode about inaction. How do you know when you're going to meet this person? You could be waiting a year, you could be waiting 3, 5, 10, and then you're waiting. I'm all about I couldn't agree more. You've got to go for it. You cannot wait for Mr. Right or Mrs. Right or whatever the situation, because you don't know how long that's going to take. And there's a lot of pressure then when you meet that person.
Yeah, I completely agree. And so you say in the dilemma that I know that it's harder to meet someone as a successful woman rather than finding someone and growing together. It's maybe harder statistically, or it might be harder when you like look at other people, but actually whether it's harder for yourself, you don't know yet, because if you're not meeting the right person now and growing with them, you're not meeting the right person and growing with them. So it may well be much easier for you to find someone as a successful person when you know exactly what you want, or you've spent a load of time working on yourself, or whatever it might be. I think we can sometimes get this like almost like statistical paralysis where we're like, this is what it's like for other people, so I'm going to apply it to myself, rather than being like, cool, well, this isn't happening for me right now, so I'm going to do the one certain, which is knowing that I want to start this business, and then we will go on to there. Next one, third dilemma. I need some help with a decision. I'm 25 years old and I live in New Zealand and studied a master's in marine biology. I planned on traveling and moving to Australia to work on coral reefs. I met my boyfriend a year and a half ago and moved in with him, and now haven't done anything about following my dream to move to Australia or travel anywhere. My boyfriend said he'll never move out of New Zealand and doesn't want to travel much. He's 6 years older than me and wants to focus on building wealth/house investments. I really love him and want to be with him, but feel restless and like I'm wasting my 20s and not exploring. He used to be really sweet at the start of our relationship, but is definitely less sweet now. He says all relationships fade to this level of affection. I know I'm a high effort person and he is less high effort. Do I stay with my boyfriend who I really love, / not sure if he loves me, or go traveling?
Wow. Whoa.
I have a very clear answer.
You've got your...
I'm literally like bursting at the seams.
Well, in that case, put me out of my misery, Grace. Go for it, because I'll try and be diplomatic, but you're going to give it to us.
I'm not going to be diplomatic because you know, in the way you've written this, you know that this is the relationship is not going to last, and that is fine. And I feel like that would be perhaps sadder if you weren't also being held back from all of these other things that you want to do. I feel, first of all, this completely not based on decision making, but my strongest belief in relationships is that high effort people should be with high effort people and low effort people should be with low effort people. Not because one is better than the other, but because the mismatch means that if a high effort person is with a low effort person, they're always going to be feeling like they're putting in so much, and the low effort person is always going to feel like they can never do enough to please the other person. So in my opinion, it's just a mismatch, and that's as someone who is a very high effort person, and I feel like in every other relationship I've been very much like, I do everything and I don't feel like I'm getting the same amount. And I just thought that was like a men-women thing. I thought that was like a women do that, they are just more caring, they are just like more this, and actually it turns out it was a relationship because I'm very lucky to have a high effort person now. But that's like a fundamental belief I have. Of course, there's like honeymoon period and everything, but I do believe in being treated right and having your love languages and your needs met even years into the relationship. Like, to me, that's an expectation. In terms of the rest of it, I feel like, in my opinion, even if you'd removed the second half of it in terms of like the fact that I feel like personally you are becoming aware of the fact that maybe this isn't a longer term thing based on how you feel about the relationship and him now, I would say personally to try and make it work with you just going traveling, in my opinion, because as you said, most of these regrets come from inaction. And like, you can sit around for the next 6 years until you're the age he is, and he's built all his wealth and house investments that he wants, and you've done none of the stuff that you wanted to in your 20s. And like, compromise is important, but compromising what you want out of something it's just not necessary, and it's not the only option. Like, your relationship could work if not. I personally think, like, as I've said on the rest of it, like, I personally think there are other things there as well that aren't necessarily working, but that would be my opinion.
There we go. Yeah, I do agree with you, Grace. I feel like we've talked about inaction being one of the most important things that so many people, you can't go back and get that time back, sadly. Time will pass whether we act or don't act, and we can't go back and go 10 years ago I wish I'd done this thing and I never did it. Also, the closed door decision thing. Maybe the relationship, even if you end the relationship to pursue something new, maybe if it is meant to be and that is your person, maybe it will come full circle and you'll end up together in the end. Like, it's not a closed door decision that you might not, get back into the relationship. But I definitely think, as you said, sometimes it's the undertone of how it's written, how the question is kind of presented. And yeah, of course, no relationship is perfect all of the time and all of the rest of it. But it just feels as though, again, talked earlier around, you already know what you want to do. That's not the same as you already know what to do. You already know what you want to do. And I think if that is in there, I really hope this person goes, yeah, I do know what I want to do, but they almost want validation or permission or someone else. Like, here's a real test for this person. If this partner was to end the relationship, how would you feel about pursuing your other goals, your career goals? Would you feel relieved? Would you feel free? Would you feel happy? Would you feel excited? Would you feel devastated and gutted and broken? Like, it might be a combination of the two, right? That's life. We're complex. The human condition, unfortunately, is very complex. But I think one's going to trump over the other. And if that decision was made for you how would you feel about that?
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you there. And before we wrap up, I'd like to ask you, seeing as you've given us such good advice, what is the best piece of advice that you have ever received?
That's a great question. The best piece of advice that I've ever received, no matter how good it is or how bad it is, it won't last. Everything's impermanent. So when something's terrible, it will pass. And when something's amazing, it will also pass. The highs, the lows, it's so difficult. Again, the human condition is so challenging to kind of accept that as the truth. But I can't think of a single time or anything in my life where that hasn't been the case.
Yeah.
So it's good to remember it, because when the highs are high, it's not going to last. And when things are really tough and challenging, it's not going to last. And that's, I always come back to that.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.